Yo, what is up, y'all? Welcome back to the Father Built podcast. This is where we build up fathers in holiness, healthiness, happiness, and aim to give these men the tools to build their house of legacy. I am your host, Bobby Peacock. And, it's a new year, so let's just go ahead and call this season 2 of the Father Built podcast. Let's go. I'm excited to start this new year off right. I'm excited to start this new year with a new episode and talk about a little bit of changes that we talked about in the last podcast. And but first, let's talk about what we accomplished last year. We did 17 or 18 episodes, somewhere around there. And for those of y'all that have been listening, one, I really appreciate that, and I want to say thank you so much for tuning in to the episodes. I know towards the end of the year, things got a little bit dicey, which I'll explain a little bit more about that. But if this is your first time listening, I just want to say welcome. I'm glad that you chose to listen to this podcast. And like I said earlier, this podcast is all about building up fathers in holiness, healthiness, and happiness. And not just fathers, but actually men in general. And so, this is one of those podcasts that's about positive masculinity, accepting what masculinity is, and not only accepting it, but also owning masculinity, owning who we are as men. And so whether you're a single man, whether you're a father with multiple kids, or whether you're a single father like me, this podcast can be for you. We sit down with fathers, and then we also you get to hear from me, and I break down, I interview the father, and then, or just another guy. And then the next episode is me breaking down kind of what we talked about and some of my thoughts. And so I'm excited to bring you along on the journey of this podcast as well. And so, yeah, I just want to briefly talk about last year and starting this podcast. I learned a lot, and I just realized that I have my lotion. I was putting lotion on my hands, so I gotta move that out of the shot. But I had my lotion on the table. My apologies. That's a little bit embarrassing, but you know, it's winter season. It's dry out there, so I gotta use a lot of hand lotion. So, um, but yeah, I want to talk about last year, man. We accomplished a lot of good things, 17 episodes. But also I realized that I went through a lot of seasons, um, last year. And towards the end of the year, it was just, for me, it was just a little bit of a tough season. Um, and feeling overwhelmed with things that were going on in my personal life. And it was tough. And if you hear that, my uh my heater just turned on, so this episode's going great right now. um but anyways, uh yeah, I just couldn't prioritize the podcast. And so I got really inconsistent, and then I just decided, I'm like, you know what, I just need to not overpromise, and and just kind of just let it be. Let me breathe through the season that I was walking in, um, and just embrace the inconsistency, um, and be okay with that. And so it was tough. It was hard because I felt like I was letting a lot of people down. I would go out and hang out with people in public and be like, Bobby, we haven't seen you on the podcast, or what's going on? And I just had to have an honest conversation and just say, hey, right now it's just been a really busy season, and I have to prioritize other things in my life, um, And so I had to put down the podcast for, I think it was like 2 to 3 months. And so, but that being said, we back, baby. We are back, and we are at it this time around. And like for me, I rather under promise and over deliver. And so, kind of like what my commitment is, like, you are going to at least see this podcast once a month. There's going to be at least 12 episodes this year. At least I'm going to show up at least once a month. Max, you will see me on the podcast 4 times a month. So we're going to go from once a month to 4 times a month. And that is what I'm committing to, especially this year. And I want to talk through some of like my goals and some of the stuff that the Lord put on my heart in November. And I'm excited to talk about that. And so for me, being consistent is important, and making this a priority is important, especially in 2025, and especially for what the Lord has given me for my word of 2025. And so, yeah. So, and I'm not saying that that's excuses. Like, like for me, I don't like playing the victim, but I also want to be real. And like I think about this moment that I had with a friend. He took me out to lunch, and and I was really struggling because I realized like I have, people that I know that are like, whether they're just killing it in life, or I have some friends that are um they're married, they have kids, they bought their houses, they're debt free, they're paying off, or they're paying off debt at a rapid rate, and they're doing this and they're doing that. Um and I got caught up in the whole comparison game again. And this is just me being 100% transparent and a little bit vulnerable, and hopefully you can learn something from this. But I got caught up in the comparison game. And I told my friend, I'm like, dude, like, look at you, man. Like, you are killing it at your job. You are married. You have 2 beautiful kids. You are happily married. You're in a healthy marriage. And it's like, man, I'm 32. And like, man, like, I'm trying to be out here trying to date. I'm trying to get my finances in order. I'm trying to you can do all these things, be a better father. And he's all like, bro, he's like, comparison is a thief of joy. And I'm like, that is so true, that comparison is a thief of joy, and comparison can rob you. I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the podcast before. I know I've made a video on it before, but I remember it was what was it, two winters ago. I was outside, and I was shoveling snow, and I looked across like 3 driveways away from me, and there was this man that had a snowblower. And I was just looking at him, and I was like, man, like, I wish that I had a snowblower. I wish that I could just quickly do this. But then I remember I had like one of those like Holy Spirit promptings, this Holy Spirit thought. And it was like, you don't know what that man had to sacrifice to get that snowblower. You don't know what that man had to do to get that snowblower. And so now I take even a step further, and I say, I have to ask myself, like, what am I willing to sacrifice for the things that I want to prioritize? Let me say that again. What am I willing to sacrifice for the things that I want to prioritize? I was listening to a YouTube video um, by, I think, Alex Tremosi, and he was talking about how, uh, what did he say? He says the things that we prioritize. He says something like this, like the things that we, and I'm using my own words here, but the things that we prioritize are going to reflect how in our bank account and how we spend our time. And so for me, it's like, man, what am I willing to sacrifice when it comes to my priorities? And if I'm not, then that's going to be a reflection of what my priorities are. And so for me, understanding that man with a snowblower, like really digging deep of like, man, maybe he saved up months and he's like, I'm not going out to eat, or I'm not doing this, or maybe instead of buying a motorcycle, he chose to buy a snowblower, or, you know, or maybe he had to work extra hours to do this. And so I think even like in social media realm and even in life, we see the people with the nice vehicles or the amazing body, and we look at us, but we don't understand, like, yo, they're in the gym 7 days a week or 6 days a week busting their butt to get where they're at. I feel like so often we see the outcome, but we never see the work. When it comes to comparison, I should say, when it comes to comparison, in the negative side of comparison, we see the outcome, but we never see the work that they do to get to that outcome. And so for me, it's like taking a step back and saying, okay, you know what? I'm no longer going to compare myself to other people and where other people's journeys are at, right? Because we're not all on the same page. We all have different stories. All have different journeys. But instead, what I'm going to do is that I am going to focus on me. And I am going to focus on my journey. And I'm going to focus on getting better in my journey and work hard. Because at the end of the day, people are going to see the success, but they may not understand what it takes to even get to that success. Because like there's this saying that has been going on in my mind all this year. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about goals and stuff, and but there's a lot of people, like, especially in the millennial generation, and also Gen Z. They use this term that says like, watch me cook, right? It means like, watch me go off, like, watch me get it, right? And something that I'm adopting is I'm going to cook in silence. I'm going to cook in my kitchen when no one's watching. So don't watch me cook. I'd rather you see the outcome of my goals and my expectations for this year than see what I'm talking, because at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words. So I rather let my actions move forward and my words be less. Actions be more, words be less. Actions be more and my words be less. Because like, we can talk a good game and we can talk about all that we want to do, right? And we can post it on social media for the world to see. But at the end of the day, that's just us talking until we get to the point of like, okay, like, I'm gonna work, but I'm gonna work in silence. And so, yeah, kind of went off there. I want to go back to that season in my life. Like, something that I think I said earlier is that like, I don't like being the victim. Like, I don't like playing the victim. It was a reality for me, right? With not doing this podcast and not making this podcast a priority and making other things a priority and stuff. That was a reality for me of making certain things a priority in my life that either one could have benefited me, or two did not benefit me, but it was more of like the entertainment thing. And so because let me tell you, podcasts, they take work, it takes planning, it takes, I look at it as like it's kind of like a weekly sermon. And so like for me, um it's one of those things where I don't like being the victim, right? Like the Bible talks about, like in Romans, 8:37 says, we are more than conquerors, and that's through Jesus, right? And so it's like for me, I don't want to claim the victim. I want to claim being more than a conqueror, right? Because I got Jesus. And like I tell people all the time, like I've had my whole life to play the victim. Like being in the foster system, you know, um, not knowing, my biological father or my mother, and struggling with identity and all these other things. Like I had my whole life to play the victim. And yes, there were moments in my life that I did, right? Because we've all had those moments. But now it's just like, no, like I'm going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to have other men in my life hold me accountable for, for um, my actions. And, even going back to my friend, right, at that lunch, um, it was, that lunch was tough because he said a hard truth to me. And like this comes out of, like, he's like one of those Proverbs 27:17 friends. It's like, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another person, right? Dude, it wasn't easy for me to hear, like, bro, like, just stop. It's like, why are you comparing yourself? There's no point in doing that. And he kind of got in it on me, but like what we don't understand when it comes to iron sharpens iron, right? There's sparks, there's friction. It's gonna hurt. Like sharpening is not easy, pruning is not easy. But like once you get through that season, the fruit that you're gonna bear, the sharper that you're gonna be, is gonna be way better than just being dull. So I'd rather go and hear the difficult things than not. And so, yeah. Um, so I'm going into this year with expectations. And I think I told you this, but every year in November and December, um, I work on my goals. And I start praying about, like, hey, God, what do you have for me in this year? Now, I'm going to give you guys kind of like the 5,000, 10,000 foot vision, like basically the surface level, and we'll take it a little bit deep within the surface level, but I'm not going to give you guys like the specifics, because it's like, yo, I want y'all to see the outcome instead of I want y'all to see the actions instead of hearing the words. And I have my 12 that are holding me accountable to these, and some of them are in separate areas of my life. And so, but I realized, through prayer and going to God, there was something that the Lord really spoke to me. He said, let 2025 be the year that you build your house. And I'm like, so he gave me the word, like, build your house. And I'm like, man, what does that mean? And he helped me realize that I have been so busy helping other people build their house that I have been neglecting my own. Like, I have sacrificed and time and effort and even finances for other people. And I realized Um, like last year, I did that a lot. And like I have a pastor's heart, and like there's some times where I'll get like a 3 o'clock phone call, and that's different, right?
Mm.
But I realized that, like, okay, I need to, if I continue sacrificing for all of these people, I'm taking away from my son. I'm taking away from my son's future. I'm taking away from me, and I'm taking away from my future. So I have to set boundaries in that sacrifice, because I was helping people build their kingdoms or build their houses, but yet I was still working on the foundation of my house, or I was still working on building the walls of my house. And so now I'm in the season of like, okay, there are people that I'm willing to sacrifice for, but I also know there's boundaries. I need to put boundaries within my sacrifice, because if I'm going to continue to neglect my house to build someone else's house that I can't even live in, what am I doing? And so for me, it's really um it's really looking at that and saying, okay, what are the areas? I talk about the seven, right? um the spiritual health, the mental health, the physical health, the financial health, the fatherly health, um and then the business health and relational health. Those are 7 areas that every year I focus on. And this year I'm really taking those and saying, okay, what does that look like for me in each one of those areas? And I know I can only juggle 3 things. And so some of those things are going to overlap. But I know um, that this is a year that I need to, I'm just saying, this is a year I need to be selfish. Like, I look at this Bible verse, right? Like, when it talks about sacrifice, it says, love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? If my house is not built and I'm helping other people build their houses, I can only love them so much, because I'm not truly loving myself. And so for that, I have to take a step back, and I have to say, okay, this is what it means to build my house. This is what it means to lay the foundation. This is what it means to sacrifice for me. This is what it means to love myself, so that I can love my neighbor well. And so that's kind of like what the Lord has given me. I mean, um, and I feel like that's the season that I'm entering in, and it's like, Psalms 127, going off the house theme of, it says, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. So I believe that the Lord is calling me to work alongside with Him to build my house, because last year there was moments that I was laboring in vain. And the other thing too, um, is, like Matthew 7, uh, 7:24 through 27, and this is the Bible verse about the building the house on the rock versus building the house on the sand, right? Um, and so it says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. And so for me, I feel like I have the foundation. I feel like I'm moving, but now it's a matter of figuring out, like, okay, how do I not make this house fall? Am I going to use mud and straw, or am I going to use, concrete, or wood to start building the walls of the house, to make a strong framing? And so for me, it's really building. The foundation is there. I know the things, right? Like, God has given me all the resources. And so now that I have all the resources, now it's time to be resourceful. And so for me, it's a matter of like saying, all right, learn to say no, right? Say no to the good things so that I can say yes to the God things. Learn to put up boundaries, and then learn to protect my time. So if there's like 3 things that y'all can really, really leave with in this, and these are 3 things that like um I am really working on this year, is learning to say no. And like even at the recording of this podcast, I had a friend reach out to me and he needed help with something, and I just told him, I'm like, hey man, like, I can't help you today because I have things on my plate that I have to get done today. And I sounded like it was hard for me to say no because I felt guilty. But then I realized that I'm protecting myself by saying no. So learn to say no. The second thing is, so learn to say no, set boundaries. Boundaries are important. Like, boundaries are important with finances, relationships, just life in general, right? And so for me, there's boundaries. Like, for example, I know that I am a workaholic and I like to work and I like to sacrifice my time to work, because I want to quote unquote cook. And I love what the Lord has called me. I love my full-time job, right? And every year, the first week of January, I take off to kind of just like continue to prep for the new year, and kind of just take a breather and just like, and reflect on the last year. And we use like Slack or whatever, and I got a message, and I was like, oh, I need to attend to this. And I'm like, no, I stopped myself. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, the job can continue on without you. The job can move forward without you. They knew about your time off, so why work now when you have this time off? And so that was like a boundary that I had to set in place. And let me tell you, it was not easy. And so, learn to say no, learn to set boundaries. And I forgot what the third one was. What was the third one? I'm drawing a blank, y'all. I should have wrote that down. Oh man, that's embarrassing. But I do want to end with this though. Is that, in Isaiah 43:19, it says, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" So just know, like, the Lord is constantly going to be doing a new thing. And it's up to you to allow the Lord to either open doors or close doors. And also, like, whenever, like, build your house. You know, build your house. In everything you do, work as if you are working for the Lord. And that means, like, if you're working on yourself, that means work as if you're working for the Lord. Put time into you this year. I mean, I think I tell people this too. You know, I'm willing to be selfish this year. And selfish in a way of protecting my time, protecting my values, protecting my resources, and focusing on self. So I have to be okay with being comfortable being alone. I have to be okay with being comfortable saying no, being comfortable setting those boundaries, and whatever the third thing that I said. Can't believe I didn't write it down. So, yeah. So be okay with focusing on self-worth, self-value, and protecting your resources. And if you have capacity, like, use that capacity and steward that capacity well. Steward the things that the Lord has given you well. Because if you do that, you'll see fruit. And the Lord's going to bless you. May not look like what you want it to look like, but the Lord's going to bless you in the way that He sees fit. And so that's what I'm hoping for this year. I'm building my house. I hope that you all have the opportunity to build your house or add on to your house this year. And so, before I go, I forgot to say this earlier. A cool way that you can support this podcast, and they're not a sponsor, but I rock this wonderful brand that supports men's mental health, and it's called Friends of Felix. And one of my favorite hats is this Mental Wellness Club hat. I get asked about it all the time. And anyways, I am like an affiliate of theirs, or partner, not partner, but yeah. You know, every time I do this, I find one way to mess it up. So I should just come up with like an ad read or whatever. But anyways, but real talk, like, Friends of Felix is an amazing brand that supports men's mental health. 10% of the proceeds go to men's mental health, to support men's mental health. And they have an email, like, I think it's like once a month, they'll send out an email that's just like really encouraging, something that you can learn. And this is just such a dope hat. They have more hats as well. This is one of my favorite hats, but it's a conversation starter. And the amount of compliments that I get on this hat is amazing. And like, I can literally have an RBF, and someone will come up to me, or like just a mean mug face, and someone will come up to me and they'll be like, "Yo, I love that hat. Like, where do you get that hat?" And so, yeah, so down below will be an affiliate link, and I get a little bit of a kickback. And if you go to the website and use like Peacock 10, you'll get 10% off your order. You know, this channel is all about mental, or this podcast is all about mental wellness specifically for men. And so why not support a brand that supports us? So yeah, go check out Friends of Felix, and let me know what you think. So anyways, thank y'all so much for tuning in to this podcast. This podcast is all about building up fathers in holiness, healthiness, and happiness, aiming to give these fathers the tools to build their house of legacies. So go out and build your house. Go out and find the tools. Thank you so much for tuning in. And like always, remember, peace, love, blessings. We are out.